I wanted to take a little bit of time today to talk about this story that I've been tracking where the European Union is likely talking about implementing legislation on the video game space. Now, I know what you might be thinking. It sounds terrible, but actually, when we dive into it a little bit more, they make some good points and some that might concern you. So let's just look at the entire story and dive in right now. So we'll link to all this in the comments below, like I always do. But first up, let's set the tone here. The European Parliament voted to crack down on loot boxes and gold farming in video games. This happened January 18th, 2023, and it kind of kicked off a conversation about regulation within the video game space. I found it really interesting because I was like, well, like you always worry when somebody talks about regulating video games, but if they're targeting loot boxes and gold farming, to me that seems like a positive thing. And if we go over to Yahoo News, which we'll get to in just a second, you see stuff like this. Like, here's the one box quote that you got from the Yahoo News story. Sony Interactive Entertainment, which is fighting Microsoft's proposed acquisition of Activision Blizzard, hired, oh my God, this is so gross. Why? Anyway, they hired Platinum Advisors DC to lobby on antitrust and mergers and video game industry issues. Daniel Sepulveda, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State in the Obama administration, will work on the account. So this is something that is being lobbied for in DC also, so in the US, and it is also being lobbied for in the EU. Now, there was a great op-ed piece written by Rob Fahey over at GamesIndustry.biz. The EU sets its sight on game regulation. And honestly, he's a little bit more positive about it because when you start diving into the actual things that they want to target, it seems like they want to target the bad stuff that we as gamers don't like. So that's kind of neat. Now, he references the original report I went on. He said, the news that the European Parliament has voted overwhelmingly to adopt a report by MEP Adriana Maldonado Lopez calling for tighter regulation of video games and their business models does not exactly make for a relaxing headlines for the games industry. It's the idea that suddenly they're going to come in and regulate every single aspect of the video game space. And when things have been sort of going the way that they have, which in my opinion is largely positive for the gaming space for a long time now, it's a little concerning when the government starts setting their eye on the industry, right? Regulation is on the way for some of the more Wild West corners of the industry, but this time around, it's hard to argue that it comes from a place of ignorance, and it may actually end up being a good thing. And he references again the Maldonado Lopez report, which is again how they're cracking down on loot boxes and gold farming. I actually really like this article, and I really like this perspective over on GamesIndustry.biz. As always, they usually have pretty solid work over there, and they dive into how this could actually end up being a positive thing, and they give some examples of other projects that have resulted in a net positive gain for the industry. But before I get to that, you know it was coming. Half of you are not subscribed. I have a goal of hitting 100,000 subscribers, and we are past 97K now. We are 2,000 something subs away from hitting that goal. So please hit that subscribe button. Help me hit that goal. Hit that bell, especially if you're one of the 50% of people who aren't subscribed. If you are subscribed, maybe don't hit it because you're already subscribed, but thanks. Continuing on though, let's look at the points that they make. The EP vote is important and does signal the intent of the bloc's regulators, but it does not indicate that the EU is about to come down on the games industry like a ton of bricks overnight. The EU's regulatory approaches to consumer protection are often very strict and can step into the realms of ordering companies to do things that regulators in other territories wouldn't really consider any of their business. When thinking about the extent to which the EU could demand and enforce regulations regarding video game industry business practices, it's worth bearing in mind that next year's iPhone models are likely to switch to USB-C because the EU decided to demand a common charging port standard, a technical detail that most regulators who focus on issues around competition or monopoly behaviors wouldn't really consider to be within their purview at all. So that's kind of a positive, right? If they're going to target things like the fact that we had to change our charging port on our iPhones for so long, and they're like, look, you got to standardize this thing. There's no reason that this is necessary to change every year. So you're going to have to come up with some sort of standardization and then, you know, work within that realm. A lot of people saw that as a positive. So hopefully that's sort of the direction that they're going. The EU is more than willing to force companies to change significant aspects about their product and service offerings if it thinks doing so is in the interest of consumers. Now, this is where a lot of people will probably jump to a Game Pass conversation. I would be worried that they somehow mess up what I think is a pretty great service, or even the PlayStation Plus service. But it does seem like they're targeting things more like loot boxes and just things that, generally speaking, consumers don't like. So I have to wonder, do you think that they would like reach out and ask people what they think? Like, what do you not like about the video game space? What do you want adjusted? That would be an interesting topic, to say the least. Even the most EU-averse citizens would grudgingly accept that doing things like regulating mobile phones roaming charges out of existence has been an enormous boon to consumers across the union. Yeah, again, getting rid of roaming charges, you got my thumbs up on that one. If the EU does decide that your industry is in its sights, then there's a pretty good chance it will pass regulation that is far more demanding and interfering than you might expect from regulators elsewhere. This is not least because the EU knows it has the muscle to enforce this. So bringing this back to the Activision Blizzard case for just a second, the EU could set some very strict restrictions on that merger. So if the EU is known as the muscle in a lot of these deals, whatever conclusion that they come to for that case is probably going to be a very big signal for what the CMA is going to do and for how likely the FTC is going to be successful within that case. Now, separately, it is slightly concerning to read that statement from the author because that would indicate that there could be potentially some major shifts for the entirety of the industry going forward. I'm all fine with them targeting loot boxes and predatory practices that let's be honest, usually go after children who have credit cards activated on their accounts. Microsoft was able to actually get ahead of this, and I did a video. You can check it out here. I keep linking to the wrong thing, but I'll remember this one, I promise. Microsoft said that we're just going to take them out before you have to make any regulation about it because we agree. And that was the subscription process where it would just sort of auto renew forever and you wouldn't be notified to cancel it. So you'd be stuck with all these subscriptions that probably should have lapsed. Anyway, it's going to be interesting to see what route they go because I'm all for that one being enforced. And Sony later also joined and said, yeah, okay, we'll get rid of that too. So it ended up being a positive for people paying for things, right? Anyway, the adoption of Maldonado Lopez's report by the European Parliament was pretty ringing endorsement with 577 votes in favor to 56 against. So to me, whatever they're going to put together, it is likely going to get the support of the EU. So in addition to that, it makes me think about the Activision Blizzard case and wonder, what are their complaints about it, if any? And if there are none, does it just sail on through the EU and the CMA? If there are, because we're waiting on that statement of objection still. If you're watching this video, I'm doing stuff with the family this weekend, so I'll probably be talking about that in the future. But anyway, it's going to be interesting to see what transpires there. If there are no concessions, if there is a statement of objection and Microsoft's addressed those, do they just copy paste that to those other jurisdictions? Time will tell. The concerns about this stuff are very real and go way beyond a few click-hungry journalists still chasing the decades-old bash video games when there's nothing else to write about strategy. And yeah, you think about like Fox News recently going after Xbox for having a power-saving option on their consoles that you can easily toggle on or off. It's just a little ridiculous, and it just shows that a lot of these people are out of touch. But when you're targeting loot boxes, it kind of signals a little bit more of a positive relationship with these regulators who seem to be targeting things that, for the most part, everybody sees as negative. There are a bunch of common sense proposals in the report, which the industry should really welcome. He says, related to standardization of ratings and information or improvement of child protection systems. And, Microsoft had the big feature about how they had that system and it was great. And, Nintendo has a pretty good one. And I think Sony has one also. So like improving those would be wonderful. As a dad, I'm going to need those tools when the kids are a little older. Anyway, as for the aspects related to monetization, the single best response for the industry would be to spend the next few years showing that it's a responsible and careful sector that's capable of self-regulation where there are legitimate public concerns about sharp practice. A lot of people gave me crap because the headline of the video that I mentioned earlier was something like Microsoft forces you to save money. They're not doing it out of the goodness of their heart, obviously. They're doing it because they want to show, look, you're right. We need to take a long, hard look at some of these negative practices, and we're going to fix this ourselves because they don't want regulation oversight happening during, as opposed to them just handling it themselves. Like, would you rather a law be made that forces you to do something or that you sort out your own house and you figure it out for yourself? I think Microsoft knew the answer and they're like, well, we'll try and get this sorted. And it's the right thing to do. So we'll do it sooner rather than later. And then Sony followed suit. And I'm sure the rest of the industry will also, because they do not want regulation. So time will tell. And the author points out that this is a slow moving process. The strict rules on loot boxes adopted by some smaller EU countries in recent years are likely a preview of how Commission will eventually decide on these issues. Good. Crack down on the really bad stuff. If it's determined that it's really bad, then crack down on it. But all that said, go read the full article. There's a lot of additional context in there that you should check out over on GamesIndustry.biz. But I will say this, I do think that the industry is changing and it will evolve. And I think a lot of those icky practices that we don't like are slowly but surely going away, which means like if you're going to have cosmetics in your game, maybe there is a direct purchase option every single time, as opposed to rolling the dice, which is what just made me basically stop supporting the system entirely. Like I've told you many times on the channel, I don't buy microtransactions in games. I will play the free version of the game as much as I possibly can. Even Marvel Snap, which is Marvel Snap is honestly probably one of the best examples of monetization in a game that I've seen. Their prices are a little out of whack right now where their bundles are like $100, but I have hundreds of hours in that game probably at this point, and I have spent $0 and I can earn everything. The only thing they do is they sell, the main way they make revenue is they sell one featured card every single month. And a lot of people build decks around that card, and then that goes into the pool. And I believe it's 1 month later that card comes into the pool. So I believe Black Panther, who was a few months ago, is now in the pool, and you can earn that just by playing the game. It's a really balanced system. And at no point do I feel that I need to get a card, even the more powerful ones, because I know it's going to come to the free pool eventually. And I kind of like that one, but I'm still not going to spend any money in the game. Sorry, I got a little rambly there at the end. But what do you think about the EU putting down some more strict rules? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're one of half of the people who are not subscribed, please, we're so close. We're like 2,000 something subs away. So please hit that subscribe button, hit that bell. Help me hit that goal of hitting 100,000 subs, hopefully before the second baby comes. That would be great. Thank you so much to everybody. Thank you so much to the members. If you want to see these videos, no ads, you can click that join button right down there. And thank you to these members for supporting. I will once again... I hit the outro again. I will once again link to the video I mentioned earlier about Microsoft forcing you to save money, so you can check that out. And I don't even remember what I said. That was like a million years ago in internet years, right? So check that out and consider hitting subscribe. I'll see you for the next one. Bye for now, everybody.